So I grew up in Toronto housing most of my youth. And when we talk about the risk factors for gang factors, I had more than half. I have been arrested by the same division that hired me. I have been beat up by the same division that hired me. I have been beat up by the same members in my neighborhood who I lived with, and so on and so forth, thinking that I was possibly an enemy gang from just down the street, what have you. A lot of issues at home, not a good base, not a good structure, broken home, you name it. Sorry, I just got to turn that off. So, that being said, there was so many different things, there were so many different paths I could have gone down. And essentially when we talk about stakeholders, right? Sometimes our stakeholders in our life aren't always the people that they think they're going to be. So usually when you think of stakeholders in a child's life, who should the primary stakeholders be? Parents, right? But a lot of us can say that that's not always true, right? It's not always our parents. Sometimes it could be our friends. It could be teachers, principals. It could be other friends, not immediate family, but cousins, coaches, you name it. So someone who takes an absolute interest into bettering this child's life and recognizing that this child has significance, recognizing that this child needs love. So a lot of the times these kids grow up not really knowing who their stakeholders are. So what happens is they're forced to go out and find out their own, right? So when we talk about safety planning, let me see if I can get this right now. We have communication. So like Ron said, I worked in a lot of youth mental health, like severe youth mental health, like dual diagnosis, borderline personality, what have you. A lot of them had criminal records. And the interesting thing about all of these individuals is they had a team. And we would have these wraparound meetings, which involved social workers, parks and rec sometimes, counselors. You have, sometimes family was there. You have any and everybody who had an investment in regards to making that youth better. But it took that person or youth reaching absolutely ground zero before those stakeholders could take part in their lives to figure out what could they do individually to make this child's life better. So this is where the communication comes in, okay? So in those groups and in those meetings, what you would talk about is each organization or each person would talk about what they could do or do better to help that child succeed and stay safe. Because as we all know, I think it is an actual innate feeling that people just want to feel safe, right? But it takes a lot of different things to make people feel safe, right? It takes trust and it takes communication. So in these wraparound, all these different organizations and all these people were talking to each other, right? So now you take that wraparound and then you take our community. So here you have a guy who is potentially, say myself, associated with gangs. I could tell you any and everything that these guys did. And for me to have stakeholders, I would feel like I'd have to do something significantly wrong, right? Now there's all these stakeholders out there saying they want to do stuff, but the problem is no one's really communicating with each other, right? We can go into a school, say for an assault with a kid, and we get there and this is the first time we're dealing with this kid, but then we find out from the school that this has been happening all year. But the school doesn't want to do anything about it because they don't want the child getting in trouble, or they don't want to be taking any flack, or they don't want the public finding out. So all these things are happening in the school, we don't know about it, and here we are now where we actually have to arrest this kid for bullying, right? Because now it's an assault. So the way the fact that we are not communicating with each other and we're pointing the fingers is exactly what we're doing. We need to pretty much have that wraparound ideology, which means is not wait. Well, sorry, the main thing is you don't want to wait for that child to actually get into a situation where it might be too late, right? Everyone has a stake in this young person's life. For me, like I said, for me it wasn't family, but I had coaches, I had teachers, I had, you name it, other family members, other community members that would see something different in me. And I had to see that consistently, but that communication was always there. And that was needed for me to get to where I wanted to be. Now, the interesting thing with that, with just myself, for instance, say about policing, and communities. So a lot of the ideology with policing is that, well, if the communities want us to work with them, they got to come to us. They got to trust us. But we have to kind of implement ourselves in that community, knowing that we're guests. Like, we're guests in the neighborhoods, right? We come there once in a while because something happens. But if we're not going there consistently, right, and having that communication with people, then that communication, that trust is not going to be there. Just like in my situation, once again, I wasn't reaching out to people. The reason it worked is because they were reaching out to me. And I was resistant. I didn't want people talking to me. I was rude. Sometimes I was antisocial. I'm definitely not that way now, but back then, yeah.
So that means you lost your trust in people.
Oh, and that's 100%.
So therefore, for someone to come and communicate with you, they have to gain your trust. But then again, I don't see it too much in the schools anymore.
Okay, but that's the whole thing. So the problem with communication is we're not communicating. We are so much faster to blame everybody else and say this is your problem, this is your problem, this is your problem, but it's everyone's problem, right? And that's the whole thing with communication. These individuals had to make that effort with me, despite resistance that I gave them, despite my attitude towards whatever the authority figure was or what have you. They just kept consistently trying and communicating. But for things to work, not only do you have to have your stakeholders, but you have to have that positive and consistent communication, right? Even if there's resistance. You have to expect the fact that there's going to be resistance, especially if the person does not have the same upbringing as yourself or whatever. It's going to happen. You just don't show up once and gain someone's trust. They need to know that they trust you, but more importantly, that trust comes from when they feel safe, right? But that's the communication. Consistency. Once again, it is great to be a police officer and you walk up to someone and you take a smile and a selfie and all stuff and you post on Instagram. That's great. And then that kid doesn't see you again, right? You could have made a change in that child's life right there, right? Like, oh, this officer was great, but then they never see that officer again, right? Or a teacher who says something to you one day and then rips you a new one the next day, right? If you are going to be consistent and consistently communicating with someone, either through, and we talked about it, it's like the 5 love languages, and you talk about different ways of communicating with people, right? Learning people's love language. So it could be a pat on the back, and then you say like words of affirmation. Thank you. That's it. I was going to totally skip on that one, but yes, words of affirmation. Like, you're using that stuff, but when it's done consistently, it starts to tap into your head. Because what's that doing is, you have to remember, a lot of these youth, and it doesn't have to be youth at risk either, a lot of youth have an algorithm. They know how certain things are, right? You have kids who come from great situations with family. They know that if they do certain things, certain positive things are going to happen. Just like youth at risk. They know if they do certain things, good or bad or what have you, they know what the outcome is usually going to be. So that consistency from that communication, whatever level that is, it changes their algorithm. So now when they're faced with the situation again, they're like, wait a second.
And it has to be repetitive.
And it has to. That's where the consistency comes from. It has to be repetitive. But now you're changing their thought process. But like Ron said, they lost that kid because they had 30 minutes, a week or what have you. And then the community itself, the gang members and different people who were negative influences had hours upon hours to constantly keep and let them remain with that algorithm that was very negative and very destructive, right? So it's communication, consistently. Keep thinking about that wraparound meeting. Success. Now remember, I call this safety planning, right? And the reason we thought about safety planning is because realistically, everything we are trying to do, and if you are a parent or not, or if you have a pet, whatever, one of the main things you want, and we'll stick with kids, is that you want them to feel safe, right? But there's so many different things that make them feel safe. If a kid feels that they are safe to mess up, to succeed, to whatever, they have a stronger chance of succeeding. They do. They have that support. They have that nurturing, right? And that is all based on safety. That's why I call it safety planning. So proper communication, consistency, and this is not just one person. Yes, know your part, that's great, but this is everybody. You have to know your part. So from communication, consistency, that will always breed success, because why? That young individual feels safe. So when these kids and individuals go into these gangs, and someone mentioned, they said one of the reasons they go into a gang is because of family. We get so used to calling it gang, 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 gang. The second we put 4 letters on it, it's like, oh no. But a lot of these gangs are family to these youth that make them feel what? Loved and safe. You have 20 guys and girls or whatever backing you, and no matter what. When realistically, a parent could have did that. The parent is able to do the job of 20. But it's not always up to the parent. Sometimes parents can't do that. Parents work how many jobs, right? And they try. So who can the parents depend on? The other stakeholders, right? Every single person has a responsibility to the youth to better communicate with each other, consistency, which will lead to success because the kids feel safe. Does that make sense to anybody? Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's why it's up to everybody else. That's why I'm saying it's the communication, like think about that wraparound, right? So the people that you initially think that they should trust aren't those people that they trust. But there are other people in the neighborhoods. There are people in the schools. There's a whole bunch of people around them that they have resources that with consistency and proper communication can help breed success. And it's not easy because, like I said, to change someone's algorithm, that takes hours upon days upon months. But you have to start somewhere. So the reason that child is not hearing you is because all of those things aren't there consistently. There is no safety plan, right? Their safety plan is their gang because the gangs recognize that this is what they need, 100%. But sadly enough, that the people and the stakeholders around this child don't see that way because everyone's too quick blaming everybody else, saying this is your problem, this is your problem, this is your problem. It's interesting too when we talked about the whole, we didn't really start caring until innocent people started getting hurt or influenced by this. The sad thing is that innocent people were always getting influenced by this. It was just innocent people from different areas. That's exactly what it was. But anyways, I just want to kind of give you a little bit of food for thought.